Good morning. It's Tuesday, June 30th. Welcome to 535. I'm here in the Cannon Rotunda. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News, and I'm joined by my colleague, Scott McFarlane. Scott, it is such a busy day on Capitol Hill in Washington today. We have this, well, first let me preview the week on 535. So this week we're taking a closer look at the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, which happened exactly 1 year ago. This is something that Republicans are really wanting to tout. We're going to talk a lot about that this week, about the implications of it, what it means politically for both parties, and much more. We're also going to talk to a number of House members about things like prediction markets, the NDAA, and a lot more. Speaking of the NDAA, Scott, that is something that is going to try to come up on the floor today. They're going to vote in the House to move this NDAA along, but surprise, the SAVE Act is complicating things. Can you talk to me first about what you are looking for on Capitol Hill this week? How important is it for the NDAA to move, and how important is it for Speaker Mike Johnson?
Huge, 24 hours ahead of us. First of all, let's set the table with what the National Defense Authorization Act is. It is must-pass legislation. They have to do it every year, which means if they start attaching other things to it, everything's in jeopardy. The things they're trying to attach, and the National Defense Authorization Act as well. First up, the Rules Committee had a laborious process ahead of it already and started the week yesterday looking at some of the amendments to these bills. And there are hundreds of amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act. They're germane, but they touch everything from benefits for military veterans to flu vaccine requirements for service members to how they're going to spend money on things involving Iran and the peace deal. So you got a whole mess just to get the National Defense Authorization Act passed. Now we have the complication, which is to get this thing on the floor and to ungridlock the House floor, to lubricate the gears. They have attached the Save America Act, part of the Trump provisions, to federalize some restrictions on voting, on mail-in voting and on elections. There's no way that thing gets from the starting line to the finish line without there being some effort to strip it back out, either in the Senate, in conference, or in some other mechanism ahead of us. So we're early in the process of getting the National Defense Authorization Act passed, but it must be done.
So the NDAA has to be done, obviously, but it also is really symbolic for Speaker Johnson and his ability to govern on the floor these days. As we all know, his margins are extremely small, and any one or two members can hold anything up. The House left town early last week because they couldn't get anything through, and so this is a real test for Speaker Johnson. He came up with a novel idea of attaching the SAVE Act, this, voter ID, proof of citizenship legislation, to the NDAA. This is just a short-term fix, though, because there's no way this is going to get through the Senate, but it could perhaps alleviate the immediate challenge that he's facing.
Yeah, there's sand in the gears right now. He's got to get the sand out first before this machine starts working again. Attaching the SAVE Act does seem to have satisfied Anna Paulina Luna, Republican from Florida, and Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee. Both told me last night this is something they wanted to see happen, makes them more supportive of moving the House floor towards votes again. Small goal, but a big goal at the same time. This could unlock the House floor for proceedings this week. That really is what they're fighting over, isn't it? Just to have a functioning voting House.
Yeah, just to move things. Now let's move across the street to the Supreme Court. A big day on the Supreme Court. Of course, it's the end of the term. Multiple big cases, including the birthright citizenship case. They upheld and they rejected Trump's argument of eliminating birthright citizenship in a 5-4 decision. Can you talk about what you think is the significance of this decision?
It was something Trump promised his base, his voters in 2024, that he was going to get after. So he tried to eliminate birthright citizenship. There weren't a whole lot of people in this city who thought the Supreme Court was going to let that stand because it's codified in the 14th Amendment. It's there in black and white in the Constitution. The margin may surprise people that it was a 5-4 ruling with Justice Kavanaugh having a different dissent than the other justices who ruled against the majority on this. But there's a politics to it that you can't ignore with 120 plus days until the midterm elections. That this was an attempt, according to Democrats, to disenfranchise voters, to impact elections. And I suspect we're going to hear an awful lot about that. Those flames are going to get fanned, Leanne, by both sides of campaigns between now and November.
Yeah, also, the president has won a lot of things at the Supreme Court so far this term, just in the past few days in these decisions. The fact that he lost his birthright citizenship one, which is perhaps the one that he cared about almost the most, is interesting. Other things that came out today, the Supreme Court upheld that states can ban trans men playing in women's sports. And it also, a big case for up here is eliminating the limits on how much campaign committees can spend on candidates. And that is going to have really big implications for these midterm elections. Republicans feel like they are well equipped to take advantage of this breakdown of the wall between campaign limits between the committees and candidates, because as we know, Republicans tend to raise a lot more money in their campaign committees. Democrats tend to raise a lot more money by their candidates specifically. And now that the campaign committees are going to have candidate rates, those cheaper rates for ad buys, this could be a huge boost for Republicans. What stands out to you in what some of these court decisions say, either the transgender ban, the campaign contribution limits, and yesterday the Supreme Court gave the president an enormous amount of power over independent regulatory agencies.
Let's start with the campaign one because it directly impacts the 535, the members of Congress who now have to find a way to navigate this system. As you stated eloquently, Republicans have a much larger war chest. They just have more money. So if they're going to loosen the reins on spending, who's better equipped to spend immediately? Republicans clearly are. Though one could make the argument that we are already at a saturation point on how some of this money manifests itself in campaign ads, literature, and mailers. How much more can you really send out and have an impact? But there's other ways to use that money for the blocking and tackling of organizing and turnout that can advantage Republicans in the short term. I think what this does, though, for a number of incumbents is raise the question, do I want to get after this again? Do I want to have to raise such prodigious amounts of money to counter what the other party can do with outside alliances? Or is this just going to be the world of billionaires? And we saw, Leanne, earlier this month, 2 billionaires fighting for nomination in the Maryland 6th Congressional District. And for voters in the Maryland 6th Congressional District, they saw how that manifests itself in a tidal wave of mailings, ads, and outreach. If this becomes the world of billionaires, it may be a problem for the fundamentals of how the 535 function.
Yeah, some of the most expensive House races in history have happened this cycle, and there's multiple of them. Scott, we're going to wrap up, but first I'm going to talk about what we have coming up on 535 this week. Today we have Congressman Randy Weber, Scott Peters, and Ranking Member of the House Budget Committee, Representative Brendan Boyle. We also have a former staffer today. Everyone around here knows John Leganski, who used to run the floor for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's coming on later to talk about his new book and that treacherous floor fight that eventually got Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House. And so don't go anywhere. It is a jam-packed show. Scott will be back with you later today. I'll be back with you later today talking to Representative Dina Titus. And we'll see you real soon, right after a quick break.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
For all it takes to be a property owner and the prosperity that comes with it, you have an alliance working for you. The American Property Owners Alliance. Real estate experts, financial professionals, and community leaders standing together to support, protect, and represent millions like you. Homeownership is the American dream. We're here to keep it that way.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
Here on Capitol Hill, the 535 are in charge, the members of Congress. But in a democracy, in the people's house, you need to be heard as well. So if you have questions or comments or ideas, submit them to us at 535.news, because here with us, the floor is yours.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins. Thanks for joining us. Today we have Representative Randy Weber from Texas. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brody. Appreciate it.
You were saying before we started that your district produces more energy than any other district in the country. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm the upper Gulf Coast of Texas. I start the Louisiana line, that other foreign country.
Right.
And we come down the curve. There's 3 congressional districts basically in the Gulf, what President Trump has chosen to call the Gulf of America. I thought he should have changed it to the Gulf of Texas, but that's just me, Brody.
All right.
But anyway, so we're the upper 3, and we've got 7 ports. We produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel,
Wow.
80% of the nation's military-grade fuel, and 60% of the strategic petroleum reserve is in our district. We have currently 3 LNG plants, and I can't tell you about all the chemical plants and the refineries that we have. We produce. And not only that, we produce 80% of the nation's military fuel, as I said. The port of Beaumont, which is one of our 7 ports, moves more military personnel and equipment out of the country than any other ports of the other 49 lesser states.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. And you've got Cheniere down there and some of the other big
well, Cheniere's across in Louisiana,
okay.
And we actually help with Cheniere. The Sabine Neches Waterway divides Louisiana from Texas. It's the second longest waterway in the Gulf in this area, wow. Second only to the Mississippi River. And they're probably 7 or 8 miles across the Sabine Neches Waterway from us, the Louisiana border, and I've been there.
Yeah.
But the Sabine Neches Navigation District helps them move ships out. So Texas has a part in that. And by the way, Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy, was there about 3 weeks ago, met him down there. And then I actually went with him over to Louisiana to look at some of the LNG plants in Louisiana, because between Louisiana and Texas, we produce a lot of LNG.
Amazing. And then you've also got shipbuilding. So
we do.
Tell us about that. There's recently a big opening down there.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Galveston, is actually south of Houston, about 50 miles. That's in my district. Davies Shipbuilding has a contract now for icebreakers with the United States government. Right. And they're coming to Galveston, and they've taken over a shipyard. They've bought a shipyard there, I guess I should say. And they're also going to be in Port Arthur. So there's going to be jobs. Some estimates as much as 5,000 members by the time, employees by the time they get going.
That's amazing.
Shipbuilding. The United States has been out of the icebreakers for way too long, Brody, way too long. So that's a good thing we're getting back in.
And they're building the next 2 big icebreakers are being built.
They've got a contract which will come to Navy Shipbuilding. Now they may build some of them. I think it's 6 is the total. We're trying to get 2 of those in Galveston. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to get that factory up and running. It's going to take time to hire all those employees. So it's not going to be next year, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to be this year or next year.
Right.
It's going to take time, but we'll get there. We need more ship icebreakers, I should say. And the president is on top of this. If China, or China as he likes to say, if China or Russia was sending ships across the Arctic, the North Pole, and they were shooting missiles down toward us, we would want a way to be able to break that up and be there ahead of time. I think China has, at last count, 6 icebreakers, and Russia has, golly, 12, 15, 20.
And how many do we have?
We have 2.
Really? Wow, 2, and then these 2 that are being built now.
And I think the contract is for 5, if not for 6.
Okay.
You know, we had a non-disclosure agreement for a long time, so all the details were kind of coming out little by little.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, energy matters so much in your district. I want to talk about AI. You're also on the key committees for these topics, energy and commerce.
Sure.
You're the energy subcommittee chair on science.
Right.
So I think all these issues sort of come to right to where you are, right to your desk. So let's talk about AI for starters. Everyone's saying that AI and these data centers are going to suck up all our energy. Well, do you think that some of these AI companies should be paying their own fair share, or should we just be building more plants to feed them?
Yes, on the first question, and on the second question, look, we need to be the #1 leader in AI. That goes without saying. But those industries that are coming in need to pay their fair share. Now, some of your reader or listeners viewers may not know, I spent 4 years in the Texas House of Representatives before I got demoted to Congress. And I was on the Environmental and Energy Committee back then. And Texas produces more energy. We're talking about wind, solar. We have 20% wind, 5% solar than any other nation. You know, we've got our own grid, ERCOT. And so Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature is watching this very closely, and I've been in contact with them to see exactly what the requirements are, exactly how they ought to be handled, and we want to make sure it's good for Texas, but we need the energy. We need AI. We can't let the Chinese be in the leadership role in AI, because once whoever wins, it's kind of like civil, you know, the military people know that whoever occupies the high ground has the upper hand. Well, space and AI is extremely important. It gives us the upper hand. So we want them to come to Texas, but we do want the companies to pay their fair share. We want our grid to be enlarged, and we want the energy to be there. And we don't want it to be at the expense of Texans.
And so related to that is the whole issue of permitting reform. So where does that stand on Capitol Hill? It seemed like earlier this year this was a huge priority. I really thought it was going to get done, and here we are. It's almost August. What's happening?
Well, our friends across the aisle, you know, I'm a Republican, obviously. I call myself a Christian, conservative Republican, and in that order. We want clean energy. We don't want the taxpayers having to pay for everything. Permitting needs to take place with all these energy companies. You probably know this. Texas has more miles of pipeline in the state of Texas than all the way across than anybody else in the country. They've got to move fast. We actually are working on a bill. We actually had a meeting the other day here about when people go out to contest pipelines and to demonstrate against them, they don't have the privilege to turn off valves and beat down doors and fences and stuff like that. They should be arrested for that. But that's a little bit of a segue. So anyway, permitting, it ought to be, there's no reason why it ought to go through the DOE, it ought to go through EPA, it ought to go through all these different things, and it take 1 or 2 years and then put those in succession, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. No, people who want to invest their money, they want some certainty. They want to know what's going to happen now. So we're trying to get permits to run parallel lines. Let's do the EPA, DOE, let's do all of them for everything at the same time. Why not? We should be able to.
So, related topic on AI regulations. There's talk about a moratorium blocking states from having their own regulations. Where do you stand in Congress on that one?
States' rights.
Yeah, okay. You think every state can make their own regulations on
Well, hey, I'm from Texas.
Right.
You know, we have a bumper sticker that says, don't mess with Texas.
Right. The government is also doing more recently, the administration, to regulate AI, orders on Anthropic and these other companies about who they can sell their products to or who has access. What do you think about that as a conservative?
Well, again, you don't want the government into, but just remember this too, we're also dealing with other governments, China, Russia, and of course even the Iranians are all these people trying to get into our grid, for example, and wreak havoc with our grid system. The government needs to tread very, very lightly. If it's something that has a national implication, that's one thing. But again, I don't want them telling states what each individual states can't do in their own state. For one thing, you think about New York and Maine, some of those states in the Northeast, they won't let pipelines come into their states. They don't want to use natural gas. So what do they use for heating in the summertime? Oil.
Right.
And I'm like, really? Y'all use oil when you've got abundant, clean natural gas and you won't let pipelines in? It's crazy. That's on New York. Again, let the government, let the states do whatever they want to.
Yeah. So we started off talking about energy in your district, which is fascinating. I should have started with the news that Congress is moving on the NDAA. You had a couple of amendments yesterday you were trying to get in on quantum tech. Tell us about those and what's the plan.
Well, quantum techs, I'll get down in the weeds. I actually brought an article on that. Quantum physics has been around a long time, and all this stuff with computers has been around a long time. I was told the other day that quantum was about 100-something years ago. Well, that was way before computers, but even the physics, the people, the scientists back then that were really good in physics, they knew what they were. It's to talk about two particles and how they interact and how they will make things faster and better. Well, we tried to get that in. Unfortunately, that amendment wasn't accepted.
You think you'll try it as a standalone legislation this year or next year?
Absolutely. I've been on science, space, and technology ever since I've been here. I came in 2013. And so I've been on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee for a long time. We studied it then, we talked about it then. We've been through, 3 chairmen since then? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hope we can get it up. I hope we can get it included.
On 535, we do this segment called 1 Minutes.
Yes, sir.
So the first question is, what are you doing for the August recess?
Well, I'm going to go back home to Texas and be with my beautiful bride of almost 50 years.
Congratulations.
November 6th will be our 50th wedding anniversary. Amazing. She hasn't killed me yet, and I can prove it. And we have 3 kids, all girls except 2 boys. And so they've given us 8 grandkids. So we'll be with them, having a good time. We will be there doing some things. We'll actually be meeting with people too. Our staff is chosen. They've been, career oriented, so that if something needs to change in August and when you take care of something, we will. Mm-hmm. But we'll be using August. We're going to go on a cruise for our 50th wedding anniversary, the first week of August. So if your viewers or listeners are watching me, I need to borrow some money because we're paying for 19 people on that 50-year anniversary cruise, which is actually in August, but November the 6th is ours.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite person on the other side of the aisle? Who's your favorite Democrat?
My favorite person on the other side of the aisle, my favorite Democrat. Golly, who did I come in with? I'd have to stop and think about that. I'm going back 13, and I've slept since then. Yeah.
All right. What about your best committee assignment?
My best committee assignment.
Your favorite committee?
Well, I was on transportation infrastructure for a while too. It's kind of a mixed bag. I love being on, and I was on foreign affairs my first term, science committee. So foreign affairs is a good one. Science, space, and technology is a good one. T&I is a good one but really it's energy and commerce, and I think science, space, and technology comes in a close second.
Energy and commerce is my favorite committee. Not that anyone's asking me, but that's my.
Right.
What is the most difficult part about being in Congress?
The most difficult part about being a member of Congress is that people believe too much from the social media. A lot of bad stuff said about us, Most people think members of Congress can't read, yet I've got notes I can, all this means is I'm a noted speaker, And so it's just, when I was in the Texas House for 4 years, that, of course we only met every other year for 140 days. So people knew you did it because you love Texas. Well, we do this because we love America too. We get caught up in here. But now we were all working for Texas, 150 state reps, all working for Texas. You get up here, there's 435 of us that ain't all working in the same direction. People don't really understand that.
Right.
So, but we've got to do what we've got to do to keep America moving forward. And I was a business guy, 35 years, owned my own air conditioning. I want business people up here. And I think with that in mind, America is in a good way to move forward.
What do you do to pass the time in your commutes back to the district?
Sleep. No. I take Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
I've got a lot of points built up on South. I take the lowest rate. Okay, lowest rate plane, and Southwest is Hobby Airport, which is about 3 miles in Houston from where I grew up.
Oh, really?
So I've been in Southwest a long time. So I read when my beautiful bride comes with me. Sometimes we'll watch movies, ride Netflix, and then I get to talk to people on the plane.
That's great.
You bet.
What is the best part about being in Congress?
Feeling like you're making a difference. We're in the greatest country in the history of the world that God has ever given mankind. And I get to be a part of making decisions for that because we got kids behind us. Did I mention I've got 3 kids, 8 grandkids, and 2 great-granddaughters.
Wow.
I want the decisions that we're making to benefit those youngsters and those kids of mine going forward for the next 100 years plus.
Last question then. There's a lot of problems up on Capitol Hill. If there's one thing you could fix, what would it be?
There's problems up here. I didn't notice any. One thing I guess I would fix. Golly, boy, that's a loaded question. One thing that we should fix is someone cannot come to the floor of the House and demean somebody else and make a motion to have them kicked out. That needs to go through the ethics committee. What happens, Brody, is that wastes our time on the floor of the House. There's a lot of things that need to be investigated, I get that. But let's not do it on the House just because you can stand up in front of a camera and you can make points.
Randy Weber, thanks so much for joining us. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Appreciate your viewers paying attention.
That's right.
That's good for America. What y'all are doing is good for America.
Thank you. Nice of you to say. Appreciate that. Come on anytime you want to.
Okay.
I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be back on 5:35 in a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
And we're back on 535. I'm Scott McFarland, joined now by second-term Republican Nathaniel Moran. Judge Moran serves the 1st District of Texas, former judge in Smith County, Texas, but also a member of the Republican conference who's been active on the issues of AI.
That's right.
And it's been 1 year also since the bill you championed, the One Big Beautiful bill. Was that a fast year or a slow year?
Oh, it was a fast year. It went by lightning fast because of the amount of work. And you know, when you're when you got your nose to the grindstone, things go by pretty quickly.
They do move quickly sometimes. I want to talk about the One Big Beautiful bill as we start. I'm not sure how it polls nationally or how it polls in the Texas 1st Congressional District, but I know that the administration and Republicans here on the Hill have been trying to advocate for parts of it, trying to champion parts of it. What parts do you think resonate most with your constituents?
Well, as you look at the numbers, the parts that really resonate with our constituents are the things that help working families a lot. When you talk about no taxes on overtime, we're looking at probably 30 million people that have filed using that provision in particular. And then no taxes, those no taxes on tips, and then no taxes on tips, you're looking at about 7.5 million people that have used that. So those are provisions that really work for the American people. When you look at the child tax credit, you're looking at, again, about 40 million people that have filed using that new enhanced child tax credit. It's just amazing how much we're doing for working families. When they look at the standard deduction, you know, over 90% of the people use standard deduction when they file their taxes. That is real money in working people's pockets, because that's the first $32,000 effectively free for a family that has a married filing status.
Let's stipulate for a moment the impact of no taxes on tips is something people can see and feel. Is the concern among Republicans that they're feeling it less than they otherwise would because costs are rising so quickly on so many things? That extra money helps, but now you're paying $7 for a box of cereal. Now you're paying $3.99 for gas in Tyler. It may be taking the edge off what would otherwise feel like a benefit.
Well, certainly inflation is something we should always be concerned about. And when we came out of the Biden administration, that was really the biggest problem that we saw. We saw double-digit inflation for a number of years. And so we began to slow that rate of inflation. While you slow that rate of inflation for the cost to working families, you're also trying to grow the economy itself.
Are we sure they feel the slower rate of inflation? Because it's still
tough.
Hard.
It's still very tough, and most of the inflation that they're feeling is really in the healthcare space. We've still got a lot of work to do in that space, because there's been so many years now where we have given that those subsidies and that money and that help that really only went to insurance companies and really only helped those folks that are not the end user. We need to find a way to help the end user to bring down through free market solutions the actual cost of healthcare.
About healthcare. Talking to Texas Democrats, they may argue the One Big Beautiful bill did deprive some people of Medicaid benefits they might otherwise have had. You've got tens of thousands of people just in the Texas 1st who consume Medicaid services, and there may be a concern this bill makes it harder for some people to access it.
Well, the only people that should have trouble accessing this are people that refuse to go work or go volunteer or go spend 20 hours doing educational work. People that shouldn't have been on the rolls in the first place. I mean, we cleaned up the rolls and said, look, if you're illegal and you're here and you shouldn't be, then you can't do it. If you're getting benefits in 2 states, which a lot of people were, you know, I'm a border state with Louisiana. There were people that were trying to access those benefits both in Louisiana and Texas. We said, you can't do that. You can't double dip. So if you actually needed the help, we're trying to preserve those programs for people that actually need it. But for people that shouldn't have been on those rolls, those are the only people that are off the rolls. The elderly, the disabled, the folks with children, they're still on it. They're still able to access those benefits. That's who we want to preserve those benefits for. But those that were inappropriately on it, that were just sitting on their couch saying, you know what, I'm not going to go work. We said, you got to get up and you got to work. You got to put some skin in the game to receive these benefits.
In your district, in the 1st, do you have an issue with a shortage of rural hospitals or clinics? Because we hear so much of that in Louisiana, in Arkansas, Alabama, and Texas.
Yeah, there is. I represent a region that's 17 counties wide. It's about as big as the state of New Jersey. Some of our folks, especially our veterans that we're concerned with, have to travel a long way to get health care. So we want to make sure that we are always cognizant of what are the impacts of the decisions we're making here from a policy standpoint on our rural health systems. One of the problems with that issue in particular is we have so many urban hospitals that have tried to make themselves look like a rural hospital to access rural hospital benefits. We had a hearing here recently in Ways and Means Committee. We talked to a hospital that was from New York City that was considered to be a rural hospital under the current definitions. That's just not right. And so when you're looking at preserving true rural health care, you need to say, look, we know the distinction between being in Manhattan and being in upstate New York. There's a big difference. We need to make sure that the statute reflects that.
Talking to Nathaniel Moran, 1st District of Texas. I want to ask you about your AI bills in a moment, but let me close the loop because you mentioned undocumented immigrants. There was a ruling from the Supreme Court striking down the president's attempt to end birthright citizenship. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it's a nearly 200-page opinion. I just got that about an hour ago, right before our interview. I have not had a chance to read it. It looks like a 6-3 opinion, but certainly understand that the court is doing its best to look at the constitutional language that's there and interpret what was the original intent of that language when it was written. And so we're going to have to read that opinion before I give an opinion.
I always hesitate to ask judges to quickly opine on court decisions. What did you think of the overall initiative by the president to try to end birthright citizenship, independent of this court ruling?
One of the things I've said is, look, I know that there's a lot of folks back home that want an end to the birthright citizenship. It may have to be a legislative fix, and that's what we needed to hear from the Supreme Court was, what does the Constitution actually say about this, and get a much more full opinion than what we had from the 19th century opinion, and get an updated opinion to say, here's where we stand presently with the facts as we know them and the original intent of the drafters of that particular amendment. So we want to go back and look at that and say, all right, do we need a legislative fix now? And if so, can we actually accomplish that and achieve that?
Think there's an interest or a will to do that in Congress?
I think there's certainly an interest to do that. When we've seen open border policies like we did under the Biden administration and the rampant disregard for our sovereignty and our actual national lines and having people just flood into our country, I don't know that was something that our founding fathers anticipated and the folks that wrote this Constitution Amendment anticipated. So we may need to come back and revisit that.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence. I recognize there's not much connective tissue between those two issues, but let's segue over to some of the bills you have on artificial intelligence are to ensure there's some type of alert system or reporting system if there's a danger. Explain what that is.
Yeah, so we just filed the AI Incident Reporting Act, and here's what we want to see happen is, we know that the canaries in the mine are effectively the private AI companies on the very front line of developing these systems. We want to know when there's a national security or a public safety threat that is posed by these AI systems. We want those folks to have a mandatory report to the Department of Commerce, so the Secretary of Commerce then can within 48 hours notify Congress in case we need to take action. We don't want to stifle innovation or regulate AI to death. There's other places around the world that are doing that. We want innovation to move forward. We want to beat the Chinese in the AI race, no question. But we need to know when there's a national security threat. The only way to do that is to say to these companies, look, when you become aware that systems get to a place where they can circumvent human abilities or human intervention, or when they have a biological or chemical ability to really create harm on our infrastructure or on our American citizens, you got to tell us. And so tell us within 7 days.
Does that require them to be honest brokers or to be uniquely transparent in a way sometimes corporate America is not?
Yeah, it does. And I know there's a lot of them right now that want to be and that are. In fact, we work closely with industry because a lot of them came to us and said, we need this. We need to have this mandatory reporting. But there's some that are not. And here's the deal. It's the ones that are not that you got to be worried about. The ones that don't want to report it, those are the ones you got to worry about. The ones that do report it, we know they're honest brokers.
I don't want to, real quickly, what are your youngest constituents, those 20-somethings, those college kids, what are they thinking about this? Because I sense a fear and an apprehension among young people about what AI is going to do to their financial futures, their ability to get a job, their ability to be safe. And I ask you that because you say you don't want to regulate it to death, but there's clearly some concerns.
Yeah, there is. And with artificial intelligence, what you really want to see is you want to see transparency and you want to see protection of national security and public safety from the outset. That's the number one thing you want to be able to do, because when you have transparency about the systems that are developing and what's out there, then you can actually let the private sector in a lot of ways regulate itself, and people stand up and say, actually, I don't feel comfortable with that model. But the young people, to your question, frankly, they see it as a tool, but it's such a new tool. They want to know, is this going to long-term impact my life in a negative way that is going to, that I need a little, just to give me a little bit of boundaries, just give me a little bit of protection here. Let me run free within those boundaries. It's that old analogy of if you build a park and put a playground in the middle of a big field, if you don't put a fence around the outside of the field, all the kids stay right in the middle. You put up a safe fence around the far outside, everybody runs to the corners and explores the whole aspect of it. That's what we need, is just some light guardrails around the outside, so innovation can be at the forefront, and safety can also be at the forefront.
Time for just one quick question from our fun list. What is the best food in the Texas 1st District? You have to answer that without ticking somebody off.
Oh, I know. Well, the best food in my district, without question, I think is barbecue. You can go to a couple different places, the Country Tavern in Longview, Texas, or you can come to Stanley's Barbecue in Tyler, Texas, a bunch of places in between. Those are two of my favorites. You can't get better ribs, I don't think, or better brisket anywhere in the state.
Nathaniel Moran, Texas's 1st District, second-term Republican on the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, thank you.
Much more to come, including Congressman Brendan Boyle, as we talk about some of the fast-moving legislative shifts that are going on in the House this week. That's coming up on 535.
You're watching 535. We'll be right back.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News. I'm now joined by Debra Phillips, who's the president and CEO of the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. Debra, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first, tell us what NEMA is all about.
Yeah, NEMA represents the broad electrical industry, so everything from wire and cable to motors to transformers to industrial automation to lighting to EV charging technology, sort of the full gamut of electrical equipment, and we represent that industry, growing industry, booming industry actually right now. On policy issues, we set standards to keep our equipment safe, make it more efficient, make it interoperable with other electrical equipment, and we also do some forecasting and market data, which is really important right now as the industry is transforming pretty dramatically.
Yeah, so what, when it comes to the Hill, what is your priority right now?
Yeah, well, we have a number of priorities at the moment. One is the Surface Transportation Bill reauthorization. The Build America 250 Act is, sort of on the doorstep. It's important, we have to continue to modernize our transportation infrastructure, so it's important in that regard, but there's also a specific piece in that legislation that recognizes something that we're really interested in, which is investing more in materials that are made here in America. Mm-hmm. So there's a provision that recognizes NEMA's Make It American program, which is a domestic content program, and it certifies products and facilities that can meet those domestic content requirements for products that are made here in America. So it recognizes that specifically so that, as transportation officials are procuring materials to modernize our transportation infrastructure, they can see what materials meet those domestic content requirements.
Is it the parts or is it the whole?
It's all of it.
All.
It's both.
And it would be labeled like the
exactly
Made in America.
Yes, like this facility meets domestic content requirements, or this piece of equipment is marked NEMA Make It American.
What's the percentage to meet that requirement?
It varies, 50-50, 65 is where we're at currently. It ratchets up over time. It'll move to 75% soon. And our industry is really supportive of that. We've been bringing a lot of manufacturing home. We've invested about $200 billion over the last several years in U.S. manufacturing. So we support that objectives. And this program helps the marketplace recognize those materials.
So what is the status of the surface transportation bill?
Well, I mean, it's passed out of committee, so we hope that we need a strong, Senate companion. Something has to happen by September 30th, and we hope that it does. So, fingers crossed, we get some action. It at least needs to be reauthorized an extender on September 30th, but hopefully we can get the full Monty passed.
On the Make It in America, essentially, what does it do to costs of products?
To make it here at home? Well, I mean, in the current trade and tariff environment, it's appealing to make more products here at home. Although I think that inclination to make more essential materials here really started in COVID. We all sort of experienced the hassle of long supply and risks of long supply chains. So I think this trend to make more of that material here started way back in 2020. But the current trade and tariff environment really encourages products to be made here. So I think it's appealing, and it's why our industry has invested billions and has billions more, ready to invest in this market.
What are some of those products?
Yeah, motors, there's been a lot of talk about transformers in the current grid environment. Transformers, gas turbines, these are constrained materials, so our industry has invested a lot in manufacturing those types of materials here. Wire and cable, and the basics too. Wire and cable, industrial automation products, all grid, smart grid products. So there's been an investment in U.S. manufacturing in those kinds of products across the board.
Let's talk about electricity generally.
Yeah.
I know that you all are well aware of how electricity consumption was flat or declining for decades, and now for the first time, I think in 2025, electricity use increased. That's only going to grow. So what needs to be done for the U.S. to keep up?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that many organizations are thinking a lot about, ours included. One of the reasons why electricity demand was flat for so long is because of our industry. We're really focused on efficiency, and so we've made products that are more efficient over time, and it's really kept demand flat, net flat for a long time. But now we project demand is going to grow by 55% between now and 2050. It's huge,
that's
unprecedented.
Huge.
We're seeing the early signs of it. In the next 10 years, it's largely data center driven, but it's not just data centers. We're electrifying manufacturing operations. We're electrifying even oil and gas operations. We're connecting and digitalizing our healthcare, our homes, our industries. So the demand is coming from many places. But after about 2035 or so, we really see the bulk of the demand increase coming from EVs and electrified transportation. So, what needs to happen? We need to focus on efficiency, because it takes a long time to get new generation permitted. So we need permitting reform for sure to get the new generation moving. But in the meantime, we need to focus on efficiency of data centers. We've just published a new framework around data center efficiency, how to get the most out of the data centers that we're building today. And there's pieces of legislation moving around grid enhancing technologies, reconductoring. That's going to help us get more electrons out of the grid that we have today while we're developing new generation.
So what is the role of data centers then? What sort of player should they be in ensuring that electricity is abundant for consumers, for everyone?
It's a great question, and consumers are asking the same question. I think they're legitimate questions, because about a third of every data center is electrical equipment, my members' products. We care a lot about that, which is why we worked with Pacific Northwest National Labs as well as ASHRAE. They're a standard-setting body focused on refrigeration and heating, and cooling systems in data centers are really important. So we teamed up with those two organizations to produce this framework around making sure that data centers are designed and operated with efficiency, safety, environmental impact, carbon in mind. And so I think that gives a blueprint for data center developers and operators to think about those impacts. They should be thinking about those impacts. There's been some legislation introduced recently around ratepayer agreements. A number of the hyperscalers signed a ratepayer pledge at the White House in March, sort of taking on some of the financial responsibility of developing the generation sources associated with data centers. So I think all of that needs to happen. We need to be thinking about how we're designing and operating data centers, and we need to be thinking about the cost structure that supports them, so that one of the key issues that consumers are talking about is their electricity bills.
Yeah.
They don't want to bear the burden, nor should they. So all of these things need to happen to make sure that doesn't happen.
What are some of the roadblocks for this issue specifically, and for permitting reform?
Well, permitting reform, on permitting reform, I've never been more optimistic that it can happen, and it needs to happen between now and the end of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We've got bipartisan support. We've got a House bill, the SPEED Act, very positive. We need both houses of Congress, and we've had conversations with members of Congress in both houses as recently as this week. And they've been very optimistic that something can be done even this summer. So we're optimistic that now's the time for permitting reform. I just think the signals, it's just so clear that this is a bottleneck, and it's one of the reasons why we're constrained. If we could get projects moving faster with certainty, without fear of litigation or reversal of decisions, I think we're going to be in a much better place to also support consumer costs of electricity.
Yeah. When it comes to the data centers, do you see any movement on, I know there's legislation out there, but do you see anything like seriously moving to, maybe not this Congress, it feels too soon, but perhaps in the next?
I think things are happening even outside of legislation. I was with a major hyperscaler about a month ago, and they were talking about a specific project where they underwrote the costs of grid enhancing technologies. They support, oftentimes that's the fastest way. It's the speed to power avenue. They paid for reconductoring, which is basically making the conductors, the wires, more efficient. They paid for that to happen in this locality. That was the fastest way to get more electrons for their data center project, and you're seeing more and more of that. So I'm encouraged, and if you talk to the major hyperscalers, they seem dead serious about living up to those ratepayer pledges. So I think even in spite of maybe legislation, it's going to take us a little while to get there, I think it's still happening because the private sector is demanding speed to power.
Yeah. Getting back to your Made in America, and I know I'm not saying that phrase.
Make it American.
Make it American. How confident are you that it will be included a part of surface transportation at the very end?
I'm pretty confident. There's bipartisan support for more products made here at home, so I'm pretty confident it's going to be in there. As I mentioned, the Federal Highway Administration has already recognized the program, so there's no controversy within the agency of jurisdiction. We also have a bill moving where HUD would also recognize the program, because the federal government supports housing in a number of areas. So the more that housing developers can procure materials made here at home, it's also supportive of their objectives. So I'm pretty confident that it'll be adopted.
What's the hardest part about coming up here and lobbying?
I think remembering that members of Congress are people too, and in spite of such a polarized dynamic that we all feel that there's a polarized dynamic, relating to people on a human level about interests that connect all of us. I think just reminding ourselves that we're all part of this human ecosystem, and there's still plenty of opportunity to connect human to human.
Have you seen an evolution over the years of which party is more susceptible or more sympathetic to your issues?
The electrical industry serves all markets, really. I mean, we're so ubiquitous across the economy that I feel like we're pretty we play it pretty straight down the middle. So we support renewable energy. We're huge in electric vehicle infrastructure, which was a big focus of the last administration. But we also support oil and gas. We support deep water development through electrical applications. That industry is electrifying. So I really think we've got pretty broad appeal, and it doesn't feel like there's one party or another that is more interested in our issues. I think that's one of the nice things about working for the electrical industry is we're just across the economy and really don't have to deal in an ultra partisan environment.
Yeah. Is it opposition from other industries that is the most difficult then, or is it getting members to prioritize what matters?
I think actually that's the hardest part. We're hidden. We're literally behind walls. We're underground.
Yeah.
We're, under the hood of your car. So, you don't think about it. You sort of take it for granted. So I think, but yet we're the number 2 exporting sector of this economy. We're 2% of GDP. We're huge.
Yeah.
But I think we're hidden and sort of out of sight, out of mind. So I think that profile raising is probably the hardest part.
Yeah, great. Debra Phillips, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. 5:35, we'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
For all it takes to be a property owner and the prosperity that comes with it, you have an alliance working for you. The American Property Owners Alliance. Real estate experts, financial professionals, and community leaders standing together to support, protect, and represent millions like you. Homeownership is the American dream. We're here to keep it that way.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535 News. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck. Joining me now is the co-chair of the House Bipartisan Fiscal Forum, Congressman Scott Peters of California. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Leanne.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're going to talk about the fiscal health or lack of this country. You're really focused on the debt, the deficit. So, as of April 2026, publicly held debt was $31.3 trillion,
right?
Which is massive, equal to the size of the country's economy, and it's projected to grow as much as 123% over the next decade.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. So what do these numbers mean?
So I think they're pretty abstract unless you think about what the effect of them is.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. So what we're doing is, every year, we're borrowing about $2 trillion just to pay our expenses, right? And that means that the debt that has been, and there's other reasons why the debt's gone up. Sometimes there's a war, sometimes there's a pandemic, and you spend money without taxing for it. Anyway, that debt has accrued to 31 on one measure, 39 trillion on another, and it's generating the interest payments, so we have to pay interest on that debt. Every year now, we're paying $1 trillion of interest as part of our budget on the debt that we've accrued. So that competes with defense, that competes with roads and bridges and everything else.
$1 trillion is the defense budget.
It's bigger than everything. I think it's bigger than defense. It's on its way to 100 to be even larger than the defense budget. It's one of the largest items in the budget, which means that our tax dollars are paying not for the things we're doing today, but the things we borrowed to do beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And every year, because we don't balance the budget, we add about $2 trillion to that deficit. So it goes from 31 to 33 to 35 every year.
Yeah.
In addition to some pretty bad tax decisions by the Republicans, I think, and some pretty bad, or some pretty maybe necessary but expensive COVID decisions. So that debt is really high, but it really affects what we can invest in as a country, and that puts upward pressure on interest rates. So because the government is so large, the money we borrow competes with other money and raises interest rates for everyone, which raises mortgage rates and creates more affordability concerns. So it's something we got to get a hold of.
So, as I'm sure you're well aware, when a Democrat is president, Republicans talk endlessly about the deficit and the debt. When people like Donald Trump are in office, it doesn't come up very often.
Right.
So, talk
Donald
about
Trump's been called the king of debt.
Yeah.
In his private life.
The king of debt.
Right.
And it translates to government life.
Yeah. You know, I think it's both parties. I do think that, historically the debt has done better under Democratic presidents like Bill Clinton, who actually was last president to balance the budget. But I think we need to get past that. And so we've got some ideas for how to figure this out in a bipartisan way. One thing that I've been proposing is a bipartisan debt commission, something like the Simpson-Bowles proposal back in 2010.
Which went nowhere.
Got pretty far, but just didn't quite get through. And one thing we want to do as part of ours is require a vote on the floor. We mandate there will be a vote on the floor, up or down vote, on what the recommendations of the commission would be. And the commission would be members from the House and the Senate from each party, but also would include experts who can really make sure that we deal with the facts. And we have I think there's some openness to that, but I'll tell you, from both the extremes, we got a lot of opposition.
Why?
I think that from AARP, we got a concern that Social Security benefits would be cut. And from...
should that be part of the equation?
Well, I think Social Security's got to be part of the equation. We should try to avoid benefit cuts.
Okay.
But just from the right, we got Grover Norquist and Newt Gingrich absolutely opposed because they thought taxes would be raised. I think most Americans understand you have to do some cuts and you have to do some increases, but we have to get a hold of this because it's a crime against old people and it's a crime against young people. The crime against old people is not dealing with Social Security right now. So, you hear a lot of politicians out there saying, don't touch Social Security. But here's the problem, Leanne, is that in about 6 years, when revenues are no longer able to meet outlays, under current law, you have automatic across-the-board benefit cuts. And right this year, those cuts are calculated to be 24% benefit cuts for everybody, whether you're 72 or 92, whether you're rich or poor. That's the status quo in 6 years.
So, yes, okay, I understand the stats, but we have been hearing this for at least 20 years, that in just a few years, Social Security benefits are going to be cut, and then they never are.
Well, here's the problem, because typically you have this large amount of general fund money you can pay, but we're $39 trillion in debt. There's not going to be enough money to pay it. So the sooner we get on to solving Social Security, the better we're going to be at avoiding the benefit cuts, I think, which is what we want to do, particularly Democrats want to do. And so we need to do that. But the crime against young people is that we're spending their money to solve our problems. My generation has been borrowing money, and we're going to be leaving the bill with young people. And so all the problems they're already having with trying to buy a house, trying to start a family, all those things that are getting delayed already because everything's so expensive, are going to be much, much, much worse if we don't get a hold of this, because those debt payments are going to continue to increase, and it's the young people who are going to pay those.
So what about Democrats? Where theoretically could Democrats cut in the budget outside of defense to help pay down some of this debt?
I think we have to be willing to look at cuts. I think the interesting thing about this is that I think there are a lot of Republicans out there who say we have a spending problem, we don't have a revenue problem, we do everything with cuts. They've just demonstrated that that's not true. They have the total keys to the car. They have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They made dramatic cuts in the one big beautiful bill. We're still going to run under their leadership over $1.5 $5 trillion deficit for this year. So they can't cut enough. And at the same time, they lowered taxes. We're going to have to raise revenues on people who are able to pay. And I don't think there's any way around that. I think Americans understand that too. It's tough to raise revenues now on the middle class, but there's such a wealth disparity now. There's so much money that that people are making as in part of the economy. That money needs to be taxed to help us pay for the government.
Yeah. So how does this get through? Who are some of your key allies on the right?
Well, so my co-chair is Bill Huizenga from Michigan. He is the co-chair of the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum. We've got a pretty good group of people who support this concept of a commission. We also support a target, a numeric target of 3%. We want to leave we'll make sure that the annual deficit is no more than 3% of the GDP. And we know that doesn't balance the budget right away, but that gets us to a level where the economy has a chance to grow faster than the debt.
Which right now it's about 5%, right?
Yeah, it's about 5 or 6%. And so, that would be a good numerical target we could work on. There's other process reforms around the debt ceiling that our group would like to make. A lot of us support no budget, no pay. The idea is if you don't do a budget, it's Congress that doesn't get paid, not the workers when we have a shutdown.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot of support, I think, in the rank and file to do something hard like that.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to get around leadership sometimes, and right now, I think some of my colleagues in a quiet moment would express some frustration with Speaker Johnson not pushing the debt commission like we think he should. That's a pretty easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of pressure from the right not to allow any tax increases.
Yeah. So just to visualize this, we have a chart from GAO that talks about how the debt is going to increase over, the next 10, 20, I think up to 2060, the new chart says. What happens if it gets to that level, if it isn't addressed?
Well, I mean, first of all, the things I've already described, the cost increases, interest rates, that continues to grow. There's a question, and right now people are still buying our financial instruments because we're in better shape than the rest of the world. But that could change, and people could stop buying our debt, and the debt that we have would become much more expensive for us to borrow from other places because people would see us as a risk, not being able to pay our bills. And then, of course, at some point, we have to be concerned that the dollar is no longer the currency of the world's business, and all those things are possible. So we'd prefer to start solving this problem before we get to the meltdown, and even sending a signal like the 3% debt to GDP target. If we could meet that target, it would say to the rest of the world, okay, be cool, calm down, the United States is getting its act together. But right now it's the worst of all possible worlds. It looks like there's no, Congress doesn't appear functional from inside or outside of Congress, right?
Yeah, no.
And, I think there's not, the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum, our ideas have not been embraced by Congress as a whole. The president's not calling for them. And so I think it sends some pretty scary signals to the rest of the world about whether they can depend on us to be the rock-solid economic partner we've always been.
Do you expect Leader Jeffries, should he become Speaker Jeffries after November, to care about this?
I hope so, because I think economists on the left have come to realize that, while they may not have been concerned about a $5 trillion debt, they've realized that this really is something we have to deal with. I even saw Paul Krugman write about it, which is, something new. We've gotten past this idiocy of modern monetary theory, this whole theory that interest rates would never go up. I don't know if that was a couple Congresses ago what a lot of Democrats held. And I think people realize that inflation's a real concern. On the right, by the way, I keep hearing this notion that AI is going to solve all of our problems, going to generate so much income that the tax revenues will go way up. I think that's another pipe dream on the right. We've got to deal with these issues, and I think someone's going to come to us and say, let's do it. I hope it's Leader Jeffries, and I hope it's Speaker Jeffries. But I certainly hope that it's a discussion in the next presidential campaign as well.
I mean, this is political nightmare for most members.
I just don't agree with that.
Really?
I think that gives American people way too little credit.
You have to adjust Social Security and make no cuts to
So
Social Security.
it's interesting. We had a budget committee hearing on the on the debt commission, and in the crowd were probably 20 or 25 older women in red t-shirts who were very adamant about not having Social Security be part of this discussion. And I said to them, I said, you know, like, not touching Social Security is like telling the doctor not to treat the cancer patient. This thing is dying. We have to deal with it. And the sooner we deal with it, the better able we'll be to prevent benefit cuts, which are already scheduled for 6 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Under current law. And afterward, I saw the ladies out in the hallway, and they had been giving me all the dirty glares during the. But I asked them, I said, how? They said, that makes so much sense. Thanks for talking to us about it. And I think we give the American public way too little credit sometimes for understanding that these are hard things. And the other thing I've found is when I do bipartisan things that are big, we did a lot of fighting with my own party over how to set up the drug pricing thing we ultimately got passed. People appreciate that you're trying to solve the problem, and they really want to see bipartisan results.
Yeah.
So I think that would be not just good policy, but good politics. People really want to go to bed thinking that, oh my gosh, the Congress can work. Like we did on this housing bill recently. I think that was a big win for everybody. And constituents are happy with that. They want us to take on these hard problems. They know Social Security's in trouble. They're worried about benefit cuts. Why not swoop in there and solve the problem?
Yeah, okay. Scott Bessent testified about this issue. Have you talked to him about it?
I don't have those phone numbers, but I was happy to see he liked the 3% target. They have not sent over a budget from the Trump administration that's anywhere close to that.
Right.
They're still adamant about not raising taxes. By the way, we're not even collecting taxes that are owed. That tax gap between what's owed and what's collected is about $600 billion. And when I see cuts to the IRS proposed, I see that's a retreat from enforcement.
Yeah.
Without raising tax money, without raising tax rates,
yeah,
you could go out and collect that money.
Right.
Republicans don't even want to do that.
Yeah.
So that's the mood over there. I think it's kind of ridiculous, and I think people are smarter than that. And as you see this political populism around taxing billionaires, I think people should pick up on that and know that it's hard to raise taxes right now on the middle class that are really struggling in this time of great wealth disparity. But we should be looking at ways to make sure that at least the income of those folks at the very high end is taxed. And we have to be able to pay for the government that we want.
Some Democrats who are winning the primaries against even incumbents are not talking about this issue or talking about more free stuff. How this could be extremely out of line with the incoming Democratic class.
Those candidates are not turning red seats blue. Those candidates are turning blue seats blue.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure whether there's
There's still votes there. They'll still have to vote on the House floor.
Yeah, I'm just not sure whether there's a substantive policy difference between them and the people that they're replacing. I mean, I see a lot of really left-wing incumbents being replaced by left-wingers just because they've been around a lot and people are frustrated. But I'm not sure that's a big policy difference. The policy's made in the middle, and we've never seen any of these candidates beat a Republican. So that's where the discussion's going to be.
I want to talk to you about permitting reform. You think it has a chance this Congress?
I think
not much is moving.
We're as close as we've ever been. And this started, by the way, with sequoias and forestry.
Oh, right, yeah.
We started looking at, we had to modernize the environmental laws to meet today's problems. A lot of them are 50 years old. And we observed that it was litigation around the sequoias that was preventing us from saving the sequoias. And we did a bill on saving the sequoias.
Yeah, I remember that.
Freaked out the environmental community at the onset because they said you can't change the environmental laws. We're trying to save the sequoias. And so I think we ultimately started to change the conversation around how do we meet the environmental objective rather than the litigation objective or the status quo objective. We did that with the Fix Our Forest Act, which I think is on the verge of passing in the Senate. We've got good bipartisan support there. And now we're talking about in the context of energy and infrastructure. We got the SPEED Act on NEPA reform out of the House. I would have had a lot more Democratic votes if the Freedom Caucus hadn't messed with it at the end. We've got good work on transmission from Manchin Barrasso that we can pick up from. We're doing some good work around certainty. I've got a bill called the Certain Act that would make sure that everything gets a permit, and when it gets a permit, it's observed. And there's some other reforms that I think people are talking about. If we get all those things to be married up in one room before the summer, I think we got a really good chance to do something that would be meaningful for the country, and also would really get out of the way of clean energy in many respects.
Yeah, you think it's possible?
I think sure. That's why I get on the plane, Leanne. I think all this stuff's fine. I have to be the most optimistic person around, right?
Oh my gosh, too much optimism around here.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't happen this cycle, what happens is, do you start over?
Well, you don't start over because you got a lot of work that's in the can. You've done a lot of work, but I think this is the right time, given the committee chairs that are in place right now that are very interested in this.
Okay.
I think Democratic committee chairs might not be as interested. So I've sort of told everybody in the Senate, let's get it done this term.
So you'd rather have it done in a Republican Congress under a Republican president than?
I think we have a deal now that would work, that would get passed.
Okay. Why hasn't it been moved yet?
Well, no, a lot of it's moved, and I think that right now the Senate's in discussion. I think Senator Capito and Senator Whitehouse are having really good discussions. I think Senator Lee and Senator Heinrich are going to be talking about transmission. They know the assignment, they know the timeline, and it's a little bit hard not to be on that side of the building talking about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's really constructive, and it's like a moment of opportunity.
Great. Okay, to wrap the fun part of the interview.
Okay.
5:35, 1 minute.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you some questions. I need honesty here.
Okay.
Okay. So what are you going to be doing for August recess?
I'm taking vacation with my family.
Oh, where are you going?
France.
Oh, hopefully it's not 128 degrees.
I can't believe we're spending a lot of money and time to go to some place that is vaguely like where I live.
I know. It'll be great though.
It'll be great, yeah.
And August, I feel like August is better than July.
We'll see.
Okay, so what's the best part of being in Congress?
I want to say the big money and constant praise.
Yeah.
But really it's access to information, the ability to work on big problems.
Access to information, has that become a stock trading problem?
No, I don't trade individual stocks. Not that kind of information, but it's like if you utter a question into the air because you're a Congress member, everyone wants to tell you what the answer is. So it's pretty fun that way.
Yeah. What's a phrase that you hear here, that you hear around here, that you don't hear anywhere else?
My staff won't let me do that.
Yeah.
It's the biggest BS I ever hear. My staff won't let me do that.
Like we blame our editors.
Yeah.
You blame your staff.
Well, you actually report to your
editors.
editors.
Yeah, that's true.
The staff reports to me. My staff won't let me do that. Oh my God, drive me crazy.
Oh my gosh. Congressman Scott Peters, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Leanne. It was fun.
And stay tuned, 5:35, we'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
Welcome back. I'm Mariana Sotomayor with Puck News. What can I say about the year 2023? I mean, the way that year started off and the way it ended. As a House reporter, I've joked with many people that maybe at the end of my days, I will see flashes of the House floor and what happened. We all do recall the tumult that was electing Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker of the House. Just 9 months later, he became the first Speaker in U.S. history to be removed by his own colleagues. And we all remember the 3 weeks it took to elect the current Speaker, Mike Johnson. There is probably nobody better to talk about all of that, what it takes to become Speaker of the House and also keep a conference together than John Leganski. He was the Deputy Chief of Staff, worked his way up in McCarthy's office, obviously helped him out in the speakership, and he has chronicled all of this in his new book titled Glory, Grief, and the Gavel. He is now a lobbyist at Harbinger Strategies. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Hold your book. There we go.
I like the orange tie is commemorated.
That one's been retired. That's a game-worn tie. That one's has not come out since that night. Yes.
I mean, one, the title of the book for all of us who witnessed that.
Yeah.
Glory and grief for sure. I've been joking. I was just walking with Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, and I joked to him that maybe your book should come with a trigger warning for some of us who lived through it. One of the warnings that you actually mention kind of very early on the top is all House Republican leadership jobs should come with a warning label. Caution, this will end in tears. You chronicle, all of the moments from when you first started as an intern to the final days of the speakership. I mean, when you left the office and finally took a step back, you were taking notes throughout that time. Just tell us how long did it take you to just, again, step away, not think about what just happened, and then say, okay, I'm ready to write this?
Yeah. Well, not too long, actually.
Okay.
I feel like I stepped back and I said, I have the beginning, middle, and end of this story. I think that's the hardest part of writing a book, is figuring out that arc. And I was with Kevin, as you said, for over 10 years. Started as an intern, rose to his Deputy Chief of Staff. Along the way, I was the youngest floor director in House history. Ran once in 2015, didn't get there. That was kind of the ebb of our hero's journey, and learned from that the lessons that we applied in 2023 to ultimately get over the hump. And then we saw how it all ended as well. But I had 3 months in between the Speaker's office ending and my new job, where I was getting paid by the House Representatives, which was very nice of Patrick McHenry and then Mike Johnson to take care of the staff, since we were certainly unexpectedly out of work. And that kind of served as my advance. I had these notes from my time going back to, like I said, as an intern, and started writing. It was therapeutic in a way. That was how I worked through the stress and toll of it all. Wasn't sure it was going to become a book, but I did want to at least have it all down on paper so that one day when I was old, I could look back and remember these moments, the good and the bad.
So you mentioned the 2015 race. Tell us about that race and what lessons you learned that you applied later.
Yeah, well, it was only 2 years after I started on the Hill. So I came to Capitol Hill and was an intern in 2012, full staff in 2013. 1 year later, Eric Cantor loses his primary. And so Kevin goes from majority whip to majority leader, the number 2 spot in the House. That was the fastest ever rise for a House member to that post. And then almost exactly 1 year later, Pope Francis comes, visits the Capitol. It's a very joyous day, and then the next day, Speaker Boehner announces he's resigning, and Kevin is thrust into being, the presumptive next Speaker of the House. We were in that race for about 2 weeks. It felt like 2 years at the time in the eye of the storm. And, we lost some members on the right flank. Kevin, I think, did have the votes to win at that time, but he decided it was best if the conference had a fresh face. We didn't go through another tumultuous race. He stepped back. Paul Ryan became speaker, did a great job, obviously, in that post. But we never gave up on, I think, the dream, which was, helping run the House with him. And it took 7 years, but we were able to get there, obviously, in 2023.
You mentioned you didn't give up on the dream. There was a moment in the book where McCarthy, you quote him saying, if being speaker is going to feel like this, because there were a lot of up and downs, like you alluded to, then I don't know if I want to be speaker. Yeah. I mean, there are moments of lows.
Yes.
What brought him back, during several points in his career where he could have said, I don't need to seek this position? I mean, we saw, like, for example, Patrick McHenry was thrust into that pro temp speaker role, and then he himself had to decide, I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah. Well, Kevin always had a saying, it's not that you get knocked down, it's if you get back up, right? And that was, I think, really imbued in us as a team. I was actually told after that 2015 race that there was a story coming in the Washington Post that said Kevin's going to resign within the week. And a friend called me and said, you should start making alternative arrangements. That never crossed my mind, that never crossed a lot of our staffers' mind. We believed in our boss, and again, that resilience, that persistence, I think that's my lasting image of that speaker's fight in 2023, was just him saying, I'm never giving up. And so that's a rule that I lived by growing up. I was never allowed to quit any sports, or band. My mom and dad said, if you start it, you have to finish it. We had that mentality, and Kevin did so much for the party over the years, recruited more Republican women, minorities, and veterans than ever before in our history to serve. We were obviously in the Speaker's office, enacted the largest deficit reduction bill in history. He was just the right man for the job. He was a man of the House, he was a district director himself. So he was an easy guy to work for, and I'm glad we were able to obviously get him there in the end.
So before we get to the actual race, tell us about working for Kevin as a staff guy who becomes a member.
Yeah.
How did that help him work with his staff?
Yeah, well, I refer to him throughout the book as Kevin, which my editor's like, shouldn't we call him McCarthy? I said, no, he made us call him Kevin, which was very different than I understand his predecessor was, Bill Thomas. He was Mr. Thomas. He's still Mr. Thomas to everybody that worked for Mr. Thomas. Kevin was much more down to earth, again, as you said, a staffer from the start, but just a guy that engendered loyalty. I've told this story before. I had an accident on one of those Lime scooters in town. Careful, scooters kill. I broke my nose, I broke my thumb, and the first call I had out of surgery, it was a session week, was Kevin McCarthy, before my mom even. He said, how's my guy doing, I said, shouldn't you be whipping a vote right now? He also called my dad the morning after he was elected alderman in our little town in western Chicago. The same day, Kevin was hosting the Taiwanese president at the Reagan Library. And I said, don't you have bigger fish to fry? He said, no, I want to call your dad. This is a big deal. So he did that kind of stuff for obviously us, but also you can talk to any member up on the Hill. They have that story of him calling and wishing their kid a happy birthday or sending them, flowers for graduation or a wedding. He got this place. He loved this place. And that went down to, again, our staff, but even the institutional staff of the House. They still tell me in confidence he was their favorite speaker.
So let's get into the infamous year of 2023. I mean,
Sure.
There was obviously a lead up. You all wanted to win the majority. We're hoping for a big majority. It turned out to be a little smaller, just a 5-seat majority, but still a significant one. And the Freedom Caucus for years has been a thorn in leadership's side. We remember that they were a reason why Boehner and also Paul Ryan, after him, ultimately decided to step away rather than face a motion to vacate vote. But first, McCarthy had to become speaker. And, one moment that I remember, a lot of reporters hanging out of HC5, those brick hallways, just waiting to see, okay, what's going to happen? We knew that so many members were annoyed with him, wanted to make demands of him, and that really frustrated the rank and file. And I think that was the first time that I remember many rank and file members saying, well, why don't we punish members? Why don't we limit what the Freedom Caucus or some of these other more aggressive colleagues who aren't really acting like colleagues, why don't we put limits on them? There's a very delicate line, right? And I think that's still something that Republicans talk about today. Do we punish members? But could there be a backlash? I'm sure that's something that was discussed time and time again. What's your perspective on that? Because it's possible that even House Democrats, if they take the majority, could have a very similar rebellion.
Yeah, well, great question. I think this is the facet of the House we're going to have to grapple with for many years to come, right? The battlefield has shrunk so much. When I came to DC, it was like 70 members with the swing seats. Then it was 35, then it was 15. It could be less than that in this next election. So whoever's in the majority next year, it's going to be very, very tight. We dealt with that in a way where we set up what we called the 5 families. We said, you guys have to talk and hash it out together. Leadership can't come up with a plan on Monday, get shot down on Tuesday, have the rule fail Wednesday, and now it's Thursday and you all want to go home and we haven't gotten our work done, right? So that was a give and take. I had friends tell me in previous speakers' offices, same thing. Why do you have these guys on the Rules Committee? I can put 9 loyalists on the Rules Committee. I can put Patrick McHenry up there and Garrett Graves, and we could pass all these rules, and then they fail on Tuesday. You're seeing it this week in the House. You saw it last week in the House. It does you no good if everyone's not, there on the takeoff and there on the landing. And so that was our perspective, was you got to bring everyone in. You got to have them feel like they're a part of the decision making. And even if they don't agree with the play call at the end of the day, they'll at least see where you're coming from and they can hopefully stick with the team. So I'm not one. We did debate that at the end. We said we could have easily passed a rule to conference rules saying if you vote for or support a motion to vacate without support of the conference, because that's what the conference rules currently say, you have to have the conference support to do a motion to vacate, then you're no longer a member of the conference. That would lead to those guys losing their committee assignments. But if you kick out 4 members, you're not in the majority anymore, right? So you really have to be careful. All members, I think, are learning they have leverage on every given vote of the week. That goes for the conservatives, but also now you see the moderates doing discharge petitions, right? It goes all ways. I just think that's something leaders are going to have to grapple with in the years to come in the House, and that's something I write about in the book, and why I think it's important to learn from.
So I'd love to ask you more about discharge petitions this year, but let's go back to the fight. So tell us how it started and how did you eventually pick off your opponents?
Yeah, well, in the book, I sort them into 2 camps. There was the maybe Kevins, led by Chip Roy, my friend from Texas. He wasn't the leader of the Freedom Caucus, but I felt like he was the real center of gravity. Those are the guys that they're forming a very interesting third party, I would say. They have a fairly sophisticated operation the Freedom Caucus does in terms of, they have state networks, they have their own meetings the night before votes, or the night of first votes, before conference that they get aligned on. They were really looking for more influence, kind of getting that camel's nose under the tent, if you will, for the Freedom Caucus. So they were people I thought I could work with in generally good faith to try to reach an outcome. Then there were the never Kevins. These are the folks that started coming out early. I write in the book, every time someone said I will never vote for Kevin, my heart sunk. It felt like I was getting gut punched. And that was people like Matt Gaetz and others who, they had a beef, they had a bone to pick, they wanted to create hay over this. Those are the ones we ended up carving out and kind of going around at the end, because we knew they weren't in it for any positive aims, they were just in it to sow chaos. So we were able to divide those 2. The 14 Freedom Caucus members voted for us. The 6 never Kevins didn't vote for us, they voted present, and then obviously they stayed a persistent thorn on our side throughout the tenure.
Yes, I remember those next couple of months. You talked about the debt ceiling. That was a big debate that lasted for several weeks. And then there were just several moments where people like Matt Gaetz in particular were trying to find an excuse to, again, really pull that motion to vacate trigger. That ends up happening after a decision to fund the government. I mean, so many different play calls were made. There were different attempts to try and appease everybody. We all saw the difficulty of that. McCarthy ultimately says, you know what, we're going to pass this suspension, Democrats are going to help. I'm curious, because when you look back at the timeline, the House was supposed to be out that following week. I mean, I'm sure in your position, nobody wants to live with regrets, but kind of looking at how things happened. If McCarthy said, you know what, we're not going to stay in and vote on appropriations, let cooler heads prevail, everyone go home, and then we saw October 3rd happened, right? And that was a moment where, or October 7th, excuse me, that was a moment where all of Capitol Hill said, we need stability, we need to help our allies in this fight. I know it's hindsight is 20/20, but any regret of, man, maybe McCarthy could have stayed a little bit longer had he just decided the House should adjourn, let them go home, hopefully come back in a different
Trust
headspace.
me, I've thought about every different scenario. I've spent many a night thinking about these things over a glass of bourbon. As you did note, October 7th is that next weekend. I mean, you don't have the foresight to see something like that. And you know what? I think the House needed to touch the stove. in some ways. I was glad that when Mike Johnson faced the motion to vacate, there was Republicans and Democrats that came in and tamped us down. I don't think we should have recalls in our politics. Our founders did not build that into the Constitution for a reason. You need to lead. As you mentioned, Kevin made the call on the CR. Clearly the CR was not the reason we were ousted, though, because we voted for 7 more CRs over the next 2 years, with most of those members that voted against us. Again, only 8 Republicans voted him out, but they voted for a lot of those CRs. So this was a personality-driven contest. Matt Gaetz also had his ethics concerns in play. We realized this was going to happen one way or another at the end, right? And so that was no way to govern the House. If there's just a group that's not going to go with you, that's not going to vote for a rule any given week, that's not going to let you fund the government or raise the debt soon or do the things that we know need to get done, then I think Kevin made the decision, I'll follow my sword. Let me show the House how bad this process is. That's why we did the vote by manual roll call. You know, the Speaker can make any vote of the week a manual roll call. We usually never do. And we said this is a vote of such consequence that we want every single House member to stand up. And I've had Democrats come up to me afterwards and say, I hope you can forgive me for what I did to Kevin. I think they realized that was so bad for the institution, and I hope that's a stabilizing effect in the long run, and it's a part of his legacy for taking that as he did.
So let's switch gears for a second. So many people watching our show are young Capitol Hill staffers trying to work their way up, as you were at some point. Tell us about your journey. How did you get to Washington? How did you get started? How do you move your way up?
Yeah, well, not far from here. I had a slip of paper, 326 Cannon. It said Representative Kevin McCarthy. I was a junior at Stanford. I was assigned an internship in his office through the Stanford and Washington program, which brought me to DC. I didn't know a soul in this town. I didn't know anybody. I was no one's kid, no donor. I just came here because I loved politics. I loved our government. And it was such a ride to be on. He was obviously a great boss, as I talked about at the top. I became a floor assistant in his whip's office. That was the number 3 position. I was the only Republican staffer to work the House floor for the majority whip, majority leader, minority leader, and Speaker of the House. I was his deputy chief of staff in the Speaker's office. But I write that in the book. I say, if any of this seems interesting or fascinating to you, get involved. We need good people involved in our politics. The quality of decisions our government makes is directly tied to the quality of individuals making those decisions. I tried to highlight some of the good ones in my book, staffers and members alike that don't maybe get the headlines, but are doing really good work behind the scenes. And so I encourage everybody, come out here, take an internship. That was my path. I happened to just fall into a really great office and spent 10 years there. I never would have imagined, but it led me to so many good things, introduced me to my wife. I met her at Speaker Ryan's Christmas party one year. We have a daughter, another kid on the way, so take the leap. You won't regret it.
You know, something that I've heard from campaign strategists, but as well as a lot of leadership offices, doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrats, when they're assessing the House, there's this prediction that we will continue to be in these very narrow majorities. Redistricting, there's going to be less swing districts, right? That's just possibly going to be a reality. And kind of like how I alluded before, regardless of who is in power, it does seem like those struggles will continue. We've seen Mike Johnson time and time again, I mean, including today. We don't know if this rule is going to pass on a number of different priorities that Republicans want to get done. It's something they have to continually contend with in those leadership offices. But also, as I mentioned, there is a crop of Democratic socialists who are continuing to get elected across the country. That could also be another result today in Colorado. That is going to be a contingency that in a small majority could become a liberal freedom caucus. I mean, I've been asking Democrats about that. You end your book with one final thought. Truly, if you could encapsulate the advice that you could give leaders, how to manage and how to look ahead, right? It's not like, okay, it's election day. We have to see the caucus and the conference that we've been given. How should leaders and staff plan ahead to make sure to keep those rebellions down, to try and appease those members? I mean, it's probably the hardest, the hardest question and Rubik's Cube to unlock.
Yeah, well, Kevin joked in his opening speech, he said, Hakeem, be careful. I got all the votes of my colleagues 2 years ago too, right? So things can flip in a hurry. I think we are entering a phase, though, where the House is becoming a pseudo-parliamentary system, right? I think the Freedom Caucus, like I said, is more sophisticated than people realize. I could see the DSA candidates rising in New York, progressives forming a little bit of their own pocket. And so that's what that week was about. It was us cobbling together a majority, like you see in parliaments around the world. My advice is just, you have to work with everybody, right? I mean, you can reject reality and say this isn't how it ought to be, but they have a vote, they have a pin, they have a right to be here, and so you have to work with them. we almost saw a situation with Patrick McHenry where almost a bipartisan middle came together. That could happen one day in the House, truly. If we get so deadlocked in researching for this book, there was one speaker's election that went 133 ballots. They voted for a couple months. And at one point, they actually suggested maybe making a rule change that we'll elect the speaker by lots, AKA put names in a hat, pick one out, and we agree that's the speaker. I don't think we got that close, but you could see that. And so, I had relationships across the conference. Kevin had relationships across the conference. I think as long as you understand people are coming at it, hopefully from good faith, which again, that was our problem. We had a group that was not coming at it from good faith, but you got to work together. The days of leadership, having an iron fist, in my opinion, are gone. The House is going to be a rambunctious and fun place to watch, and everyone's going to need to read this book to understand how they manage these tumultuous times.
John, thank you so much for joining us. Very insightful conversation. I learned a lot reading it, though I also lived it, so I do recommend it.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with a very influential Democrat. Stay tuned.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
For all it takes to be a property owner and the prosperity that comes with it, you have an alliance working for you. The American Property Owners Alliance. Real estate experts, financial professionals, and community leaders standing together to support, protect, and represent millions like you. Homeownership is the American dream. We're here to keep it that way.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
Congresswoman, we only have a couple minutes,
Okay.
which is perfect for our 535 1 minute.
Should I be afraid?
Who's the smartest member of Congress?
So I'm really putting you on the spot here.
Don't tell anybody this.
I'm too much of a politician to answer that question.
This is crazy.
What's the best committee?
I do like them all.
On you, baby.
That was good. That was good.
Back on 535, I'm Scott McFarland, joined now by Democrat Brendan Boyle. Top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, represents Philadelphia. A lot to get to, a lot of economic news, a lot of budgetary news, but I want to start, if you don't mind, with the 250th birthday. Philadelphia has a unique history and a unique connection to the 250th. How are you all commemorating that in your district?
Yeah, so I'm very proud, as a born and raised Philadelphian, not just the congressman for about half the city. Philadelphia is literally the nation's birthplace. And so I have Independence Hall in my congressional district. I went about working on this 2 years ago exactly, attempting to essentially bring Congress back to Philadelphia for a day. It has been a 2-year effort, but for only the second time since 1800, members of Congress will gather at Independence Hall, literally be in the room where it all began. So that will happen on Thursday, July 2nd in the afternoon, and that is actually the 250th anniversary of the vote by Congress for independence. John Adams always thought that would be our nation's birthday, July 2nd. 2 days later, of course, they adopted the Declaration of Independence, which we celebrate as the 4th of July. So it'll be very special and moving
Is
to
there
be
a
there.
gavel? Is there is there something type of pomp to the
Yeah,
ceremony?
we will be signing. We will process in order of state delegation, with the original 13 states going first. There will be a resolution and a document that we're signing, a group photo. We will tour the time capsule, tour the Liberty Bell, and of course we will have speeches in Congress Hall, which was the first U.S. Capitol. That was the Capitol for 10 years from 1790 to 1800 until Virginia and Maryland stole the nation's capital away from Philadelphia and built what we have today, literally building it on a swamp, which was land at the time controlled by Maryland and Virginia.
Do you sense back in the district there's been an uptick in visitors, uptick in energy around these landmarks this week?
Oh, there's no question about it. In fact, I happen to know that because I was looking at the stats just a few days ago. I think America's 250th, combined with hosting the World Cup,
Saturday.
those
Matches on
two
Saturday.
round of 16 match on Saturday, 5 o'clock, at what we are used to calling the Link, but it's technically Philadelphia Stadium, because FIFA has some very, very strict rules, bizarrely, in renaming all of these stadiums through the duration of the World Cup. But really, all throughout this year, we have been preparing in Philadelphia to celebrate the 250th. So I'm excited about this week. I'm also, obviously anxious that everything goes well, knowing how much time and energy and effort has gone into making this happen.
Let's talk policy, let's talk legislation. As top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, you had this intimate view of the construction of the One Big Beautiful bill, which was signed a year ago this week.
That's right.
As time goes flying by here, Congressman. Congressman Moran of Texas made the argument earlier in the program that there has been a benefit to constituents, not just in Texas, but nationwide, to the reduction of taxes on tips and on some of the things that could end up with more money in people's wallets. How do you view the bill's implementation and any benefit it has had over the past year?
Well, I know this. Polling shows by an overwhelming majority the American people disagree with him. They have found that this is the single most unpopular major piece of legislation to ever pass Congress. And think about this for a second. This bill, which did include tax cuts skewed toward the very wealthy, toward the top 1% and corporations, that tax cut bill also includes the biggest cuts to health care in American history. Already, Scott, more than 5 million Americans have lost their health care directly as a result of that bill. But that's just the beginning. There is at least another 10 million more who the Congressional Budget Office project will lose their health care beginning in December of this year once the Medicaid cuts come into effect. There were also other cuts as well, especially to nutrition assistance programs and student loan repayment programs, and I can cite several more as well. The bottom line is, as the Joint Committee on Taxation found, if you're in the bottom 1/3 of American households, you are poor today as a result of that legislation passing a year ago. But if you're in the top 1%, you made out like a bandit.
On the issue of Medicaid, one thing Republicans have argued today as we mark this 1-year anniversary of the legislation is that the Medicaid reductions would be cuts to people who are fraudulently getting the benefits, getting it in multiple states, getting it when they don't qualify without work requirements. Is there some virtue to getting rid of the Medicaid payments that aren't going to folks who rightfully should have them?
Well, first, I dispute the premise. There is no widespread fraud. And to be clear, those instances where there is fraud, I want to see that done away with. But I can tell you that every independent authority that has looked at this, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, many other nonpartisan groups that are out there as well, have found that these claims by Republicans that the people who are losing their health care are only illegal immigrants or only people who are defrauding the system, it just is not so. The reality is the vast majority of people who have already lost their health care as a result of this legislation, or are about to lose their health care as a result of the bill, they are people who mostly are working hard, playing by the rules, and now are going to see their health care costs go up. And by the way, final point on this, it's not just the people who are on Medicaid or on Obamacare or on Medicare. It is the rest of us who may have our health care through a private employer plan who are now going to see our healthcare system squeezed and cost shifting, basically making our costs more expensive to make up for the cuts and the money that they're losing from those programs.
Was there an argument to be made, though, letting those tax cuts expire a year ago would have caused quite a bit of damage, not extending the tax cuts that were extended through the bill?
Well, let's not forget that, and I was involved in a lot of these markups, being the ranking member of Budget Committee and also being on the Ways and Means Committee, including a markup that lasted 18 hours, starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and not ending until 8 o'clock the following morning. Amendment after amendment was filed by Democratic members, including one for me, that would have said we're extending the full tax cuts for everyone who makes under $10 million a year. Republicans voted no, Democrats voted yes. We then had an amendment that said, okay, everyone under $1 billion, you will see your tax cuts extended. The Republican majority still voted no, while we were voting yes. So their disingenuous argument that we would have allowed taxes to go up on working class people or lower income people just isn't accurate. Look at the actual vote.
Let's talk a bit about the debt ceiling. You have been active in pushing legislation to either eliminate or overhaul the debt ceiling. Tell us what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so as I take a step back, I've been here 12 years now, and I've observed that there have been two main drivers or instances that have been chronic that have caused real pain and dysfunction here and have stopped other things from happening. The first is the nonstop fight to avoid government shutdowns, and we face that annually. But then the second, which we seem to face maybe every other year, is a fight over raising the debt ceiling. Now, we have had this concept of the debt ceiling ever since about 110 years ago. Came in as a bit of an accident of history related to World War I. I won't bore your viewers about, but maybe
well, I don't think they'd be bored, but I understand.
Yeah, but it actually, it did not, there's a whole fairy tale that has grown up around the debt ceiling, that somehow it came from the Founding Fathers in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, that they were concerned about debt. Nice fairy tale, totally untrue. Actually, it was a quirk. We were about to enter World War I, and the Department of the Treasury wanted authority. Instead of getting authority from Congress for each specific debt, they just wanted the greater authority to pay these debts capped at a certain limit. So that's actually how the debt ceiling came into existence. And for most of the 20th century, it was raised routinely because, of course, the decisions on revenue and spending had already been made by previous Congresses. This was essentially, we already used the credit card. It's a month later, we're getting the bill. The question is, now are we going to pay the bill or not? It wasn't until 2011, the Tea Party Congress, that decided, hey, wait a minute, we can actually use this for leverage.
The credit rating fell down that instant.
The first credit downgrade in American history. We have now had 3 credit downgrades, all related to this brinksmanship over whether or not to raise the debt ceiling. So my legislation, the Debt Ceiling Reform Act, actually comes out of, it was inspired in a sense by the way that the ultimate resolution of the 2011 showdown took effect. And it basically says, look, the Treasury Secretary will have the ability to raise the debt ceiling unless Congress votes to block it. So Congress would still have authority. It just would avoid the pitfalls that I increasingly worry we face, that God forbid a future Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling. And in that case, economists, whether conservative or liberal, agree, overnight interest rates would skyrocket 1,000, 2,000%, credit markets would seize up. Imagine overnight if you have an adjustable mortgage rate and you go from 6.5% to 26.5%, or you can't get financing at all. Those are the sort of things that would happen if all of a sudden the world now had serious questions about whether or not the United States was going to honor its full faith and credit.
How does the congressional mechanism work in this for the 535? How would they have an ability to leverage their votes on this issue?
It would have to pass the House and the Senate and be signed into law by the President, so it would be a pretty high threshold, right? But I wanted to retain that statutory authority for some sort of unforeseen situation that I can't envision at the moment. The bottom line, though, is just to attempt to take the politics out of this. Donald Trump has already expressed not necessarily support for my specific bill, but support for just getting rid of the debt ceiling altogether. One other aspect, though, of this that I want to make clear, Scott, this does not in any way mean that I'm indifferent on the issue of deficit and debt. I am increasingly worried that this place is not taking deficit and debt seriously, that really neither political party has much of an appetite to deal with this issue. And while it's not a major issue facing us right now, you look at these projections of the 2030s, you look just 5 years out, 10 years out, we are really going to be in a very difficult situation as our debt to GDP is now north of 100%.
Would that mean necessarily cutting entitlements is the only way to get after it?
No, there's a great misnomer and a sleight of hand, frankly, that some conservatives out there who have never believed in Social Security and Medicare to begin with, there's a sleight of hand that they practice when it comes to this. Social Security does not add to our deficit and debt, period. It is off budget, has its own financing mechanism, and in fact it has run a surplus for most of its existence. The Medicare trust funds similarly are also administered off budget. Really, the problem is, frankly, we have too little revenue for too much spending, independent of Social Security and Medicare.
The Budget Committee has had an opportunity this Congress to have these conversations. Are you having enough hearings? Are you doing enough meetings? Is the committee active enough in this space?
Well, I would point out that literally 1 year ago in the bill that we were just talking about, that is massive tax cuts for the rich and the biggest loss of health care in American history. Oh, by the way, there's one other negative aspect of it. It added $3.8 trillion to the deficit and our national debt. So a lot of times some of my Republican friends on the other side of the aisle like to wax poetic about our debt. Well, here they just voted for a bill that is actually the single biggest increase in our nation's debt compared to any other piece of legislation in our history. So I would say, yeah, the Budget Committee has acted on this issue in this term. They've made it far worse. Moving forward, though, as I look forward to the next Congress, we do, on a bipartisan basis, need to begin to solve this problem and put us on a sustainable trajectory, which we just are not on now.
Let's talk quickly about the Supreme Court ruling on birthright citizenship. I mean, just like any member of Congress, it has some impact on your constituents, on your district. I had a Republican earlier in the program say this maybe gives Congress a nudge to pass some type of law to strip birthright citizenship in America. What did you make of what the Supreme Court did, or at least the basic premise of what the Supreme Court's done here?
Well, I think the Supreme Court got it right. I speak not only as a member of Congress, but as the son of an immigrant. My father and my mother's parents were born elsewhere and came as immigrants to this country believing in the American dream. I have been alarmed at the last 5 or 10 years, the dramatic increase in anti-immigrant sentiment that this president is stoking. We haven't seen this sort of anti-immigrant rhetoric and ugliness really since the 1920s, a period in history that actually has a lot of echoes to today when it comes to isolationism, protectionism, and nativism. Unfortunately, those three isms we're experiencing again in the 2020s. So ultimately, I'm glad the Supreme Court got it right, but the fact that there are 3 to 4 justices in the Supreme Court who are radical enough that they don't think the Constitution through the 14th Amendment protects birthright citizenship, that is disturbing. I mean, there was a thought 6 months ago, a year ago, that this would be either a 9-0 decision or a 7-2 decision. So we should all be worried about more than a few justices on this court.
Appreciate you giving us the opinion on that. It is one of those things we try to address breaking news as it happens, and it's something that does impact every district in America. Okay, just a moment left. We're supposed to ask you your favorite food in your district. I don't want to stereotype. I don't want to mischaracterize Philadelphia. So you tell me.
This is completely stereotypical,
yeah.
But like I grew up in a household where you ate a cheesesteak 2 or 3 times a week. And every real Philadelphian has their favorite local place in the neighborhood. It's not necessarily Geno's or Pat's or the tourist spots. Those are the tourist spots. Yeah. So actually, you know, if the worst were to happen and the Trump DOJ really got creative, and I was facing my last meal, horrible hypothetical now that I think of it, but I were facing my last meal, Scott, Philly cheesesteak would absolutely be the meal. And please, to any national outlet out there, please stop calling it a steak and cheese. That is a violation against my culture.
Oh, it's a violation against everybody's culture. What's the cheese you put on top of it?
I actually go back and forth. I sometimes do the whiz. I'll sometimes do different kind of cheeses. There's some people who are very specific on that. Sometimes I'll have fried onions, sometimes I won't, depends on my mood.
Way to be inclusive of
But
everybody in the
definitely
district.
I will say this, political, definitely not Swiss.
Yeah.
That was the mistake that John Kerry made in
Yes,
2004. So,
Brendan Boyle, Congressman from Philadelphia. Good luck Thursday with the event. Thank you very
thank
much.
Thank you.
That is it for 535. Hearing no objections, we will gavel out for the day. We're back here tomorrow with another busy day in the U.S. House. I'm Scott McFarland, and thank you for watching.